Welcome to the third session of our Board of Governors review session. In behalf of the California Association of Healthcare Leaders and San Diego Organization of Healthcare Leaders, I'd like to welcome you all for the third session. So today we will be discussing on the three body of knowledge that are included in the exam. So we are doing the professionalism and ethics, which is 16 points of the exam or equates to 8%. Laws and regulation, 18 points of the exam. And the governance and organizational structure, which is 12 points of the exam. Just also a reminder to everyone that today we will be culminating the session at 12 o'clock, since we will be discussing three knowledge areas. Okay, so next slide, please. So before we begin, I'd like to introduce you to the committee members who dedicated their precious time to make this event successful for the whole month of October. So here's the California members of Advancement Committee for the call. And the next slide is our partners from the San Diego Organization of Healthcare Leaders. So before we will proceed with the main topic of this event, I'd like to bring in Pranab, the president of San Diego Organization of Healthcare Leaders, to give us some inspirational or welcome address.
Hi there. Thank you so much. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, as as mentioned, my name is Pranav Dixit. I'm this year's president for Seoul, and just wanted to commend you all for participating in this this series of the BOG prep. We at Seoul, we're as I'm sure you must have heard by now, we're a chapter of the American College of Healthcare Executives that covers San Diego and Imperial counties. We have about 500 members. We probably, and for those of you that are not familiar with Seoul, it's probably very similar to Cal. We host networking events, professional development events. We have our strong mentorship program. We have an annual conference. We kind of it's I don't know, for as part of the BOG and preparing to get your fellow status, you need some face-to-face credits. So I hope that you'll join us in some of our face-to-face events too, and as you work to build up those credits. I know that Cal offers them, and we put on events together often, but know that we're another resource here to help you as you continue on your journey as healthcare executives. For those of you that are based in the San Diego chapter, great to see you all, and again, very it's a commendable thing to pursue the fellow status. So please let me know, let Florencia and Mary know how if there's anything we can do to help support you. Whether it's lining up fellow interviews as part of the process, wherever we can lean in. Please let us know. That's all. Thank you very much, and looking forward to a great session today.
Okay. Thank you, Pranav. So next slide, please. So I'd like to turn over to Nora to give us some updates, on the next few slides.
Hi, good morning. Just really quick updates. Remember, you can get study materials through ACHE. The ACHE bundle set is a really good resource. We are going to be distributing a Survey Monkey after the webinar series, and we really do take all your comments seriously. We are world famous and award-winning now because of all the people that have given us recommendations and getting their opinions after their sessions. So please, this is your way to pay it forward. So this series is worth 8 hours of qualified education, and you need to self-report those yourself in the My ACHE section of the ACHE website, where you fill out all your own stuff. You can self-report that. Let me know if you have any more questions about that. Next slide, please. Okay, so you've now been with us. This is going to be the third session, and you get where we're coming from when we're looking at how to read the structure of the questions in order to understand what they're asking and give you a better idea of how to answer. So again, the whole key, relax. You've got time. Do that, all that good breathing stuff, like the heart focused breathing. In particular, you've seen how Rick does read each of the options as a true or false. That helps eliminate some right off the bat. Read and reread each question. And again, my favorite thing is read it backwards. You'll catch words that you've missed the first time. Beware of questions that have like all of the above, all except, even further down, only, never, always. You know, be careful of those, and it'll help clue you in on where to go after you read those. Again, don't stress on time. You have 6 hours, take breaks. You can mark your questions for review and come back. Again, as you're reading the questions, look for the key terms. You know, are they asking for the best option for whatever specific thing? So it'll help focus in. There's some questions you'll see that beware of answers that are complete distractors and have nothing to do with anything. You know, just, you know, beware of those and don't go down. I've gone down through rabbit holes chasing those. Again, the broadest answer tends to be the most appropriate in most of these questions. And remember, this is a nationwide exam. So whatever is funky in California doesn't apply to the rest of the nation. So don't go down that rabbit hole either. And again, be cautious of the absolutes. If you see only or never, you know, that helps focus in on how to answer that question. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay, I think that's me. We are ready to move forward with the main discussion or main topic of this event. However, I'd like to introduce to you our, you know, our I would call it every time this session I would call it Rick Show, the Rick Show, because you know not only he's facilitating this, he's also doing our brain walk. And Rick has one of the one of the I think originator or the original people to start this session, a review session with Nora, and he's currently the professor for California State University in Chico. He is attorney at law. He is also the unit leader for state disaster medical for CalMat, and a founding member as a treasurer for Cal. Wow. And as I said, he's been a BOG faculty since 2014 and had a lot of different awards. So Senior Executive Award, President and Regents Award, Cal Volunteer of the Year, and ACHA Distinguished Service Award. So without further ado, it's my pleasure and honor to present to you Rick Narad. Take it away, Rick.
Yes, if I unmute, that helps. Good morning, everyone. So I get to do two of my favorite ones this week, the law and the ethics. And I'm actually teaching a class right now for our Health Admin program on healthcare law and ethics. So this is really good timing because I'm thinking about it. But I want to point out, as I did earlier in one of the other sessions, that I even looked at these questions before. So I am attempting to look at them new and walk you through my brain as I try to figure out what it is that I want to answer in that question, right? So I'm going to take it slowly. I'm going to try to analyze the question. I'm then going to look at each one of the answers and see what I come up with. I do want to point out one thing on getting ready for the ethics, profession in ethics, which is that one of the best resources, which by the way is free, is the ACHE Code of Ethics and then their various policy statements. You can't memorize it. It's too big. You're not going to memorize it. But I would look at it and look at the 6 sections that they list, right? The Code of Ethics is broken into sections. Get an idea of what the sections are and then get a sense of what fits in underneath them. underneath each of those. Okay. So that would be my recommendation for the professionalism and ethics. And let's go on to the first question. Oh, we're not on the question yet. Okay, well, everyone knows how to read. This is on ACHE stuff, so we don't have to reread it, but this is what's covered in there. And again, you see right up there the standards for the Code of Ethics. Ethics committees is another good one to be familiar with. Okay, now we're on the first question. So, and we're hitting ethics committee. So I'm looking at that, the primary task of an ethics committee. So I know it's about ethics committees I have to focus on, not ethics itself. And it's saying the primary task. So I'm looking for something that I can argue is the most important thing that an ethics committee does. And that means I should know something about how they function. So arbitrate conflicting decisions by caregivers. Okay, now the word arbitrate is an arbitrator is someone who makes the decision for you, like a judge. And yeah, they don't do that, so that's false. Develop the organization's ethics plan. Maybe. They're certainly involved in writing ethics statements and stuff. Act as the surrogate body for regular decision makers. No, they do not substitute their judgment. They assist, they mediate, they educate, but they do not jump in and make the decision for you. So that's false. So what I've got false, maybe, false, and get D. So formulate policy and educate hospital personnel. Yeah, that's their primary thing. And you notice that includes developing the ethics plans. It shows how C is wrong because it's not replacing it, it's educating them. So I'm going to go with D. And looks like D was the right answer.
I'd like to just interrupt really quick. Another thing we're going to add to our little thing about being careful. When you see in some of the other questions, there's just going to be a lot of words. Again, if you just take each one, like we were saying, you don't need to freak out when there's just lots of words. So just wanted to add that.
Good. Let's move on to the second question. The major purpose. Now, the other one we had was the primary purpose. Now we're saying the major purpose. So I'm wondering, does that mean the same thing, or is primary more important than major, or whatever? I don't know. But we're looking at a code of ethics for members of a health executives association. I wonder who that might be. I don't know if it matters. I think major purpose of a code of ethics is what I'm going to look for. So provide guidance to members in their own professional conduct. That sounds pretty good. That's definitely true as a purpose. Increase public understanding of the association. That's not really the code of ethics. So that's false, I think. Provide a framework for disciplining members when necessary. Well, you know, the code of ethics for ACHE does have a mechanism for reviewing it if people complain, but that's not really a major purpose. Hopefully it's a never purpose. Provide a framework for annually evaluating performance. I don't think so. Maybe your annual review looks at your ethics, but it's certainly not the major framework. So what do I have? I've got a true, I've got a false, I've got another false, and I've got another false. So I'm going to go with A. All right. Let's go to number 3. The ethical precepts. Oh, God. This takes me back to my undergraduate days when I took a philosophy class. Ethical precepts that guide an organization's activities. Do we sit around talking about ethics? I'm not sure. But are found in a variety of resources. So then think back, where do I find resources about ethics in my organization? Okay, this is going to be interesting. Reflected in everyday actions, probably. The sole province of senior management, no, absolutely not. You want it throughout the organization, so that one's false. Part of the governing board's formal actions. I don't know. I mean, it's reflected in their formal actions, but it's not really a part of it. So I don't think so. Written and unwritten. Well, yeah, you've got cultural issues. You've got policies itself. So I've got A, which might be true. I've got D, which might be true. And I'm going to look back at the question, and it's saying found in a variety of resources. So I'm thinking D is more likely to be a resource, right? Not just looking around at what people are doing, but something I could look up. So I'm going to go with D. Although A was a good distractor for me. It really made me think of which of those two it was. I think A is true, but D is more of a resource. So that's why I went with that one.
So, Rick, quick question. So, for the unwritten, what are the different examples of unwritten ethical, or organizational philosophy?
I think it comes down to the culture, right? If your culture is, how do we lie, cheat, and steal? That's going to happen. Everyone's going to learn that. If, on the other hand, people say, no, we don't do that in our organization, then people are going to learn that. So I think that's probably a stronger driver of our cultural actions than our written statements.
Thanks.
Let's go to number 4. Which of the following conditions must be met? Human subjects in medical research. So that's the focus here. What do we have to do to use people in medical research? Okay. So no suitable animal model exists for use instead of people. Well, not really, because I mean, the last part of any kind of drug research is people. You start in the lab, then you go to the animals, then you go to the people. So that's probably not true. The research program has been approved by the medical staff. No, medical staff's really not involved there. Research program has been approved by the governing authority. Again, no, not really. I mean, it's got to probably go through your human subjects committee, but not the governing authority. And then risk should be explained in understandable language. Yes. So now we're getting into autonomy and consent. And yeah, D is definitely the strongest answer there. So I'm going to go with D. It looks like a couple other people said D as well. Good. Well, let's go to number 5. All of the following. Oh, okay. When I start out with all, that I'm getting triggered that there might be something else to look at there. And I notice at the end, except. So what this is telling me is that I'm going to have 3 correct and 1 wrong, and I'm looking for the wrong one. So I got that right away before I've even looked at the what they're looking for. So all the following are commonly recognized to be a right of each patient. Right. So I'm looking, what is a patient right? Okay. Receive considerate and respectful care. I'd like to think that's a right. I don't really think it is in many organizations, but I'd like to think that. Access protective services, probably. I think. Communicate with a caregiver in the language of the patient's choosing. Now, California, we've got that in law, but nationally, is that considered a right? And then be informed about and participate in decisions. Yeah, that one definitely is part of it. So D can't be included because I'm looking for the except. So I'm looking back at A, B, and C. And I think A is going to be there as an opening statement on the patient bill of rights. So I'm going to say that one's not it. So it's two really specific things. A is real general, B and C are really specific. Access protective services or communicate with the caregiver in the language of the patient's choosing. Where I'd like to think they're both there, but which one is a patient right? I'm thinking that B is more likely to be that than C. And I could be totally wrong here. I'm kind of flipping a coin in my head. So I'm going to go with C as the accept. That literally was like flipping a coin. It could have been either one of those. Remember, if you can eliminate 2 of the 4, you're doing well, because 50-50 is better than 25% in terms of your guessing. All right, let's go to number 6. Conflict of interest. Yeah, should know conflict of interest. That does seem to show up regularly. So know what a conflict is. So a conflict may only be a matter of degree. That's one of those questions that gives me more information than I need. Okay. Conflict of interest exists when a healthcare executive refuses to. So I'm looking for an action by a healthcare executive saying no, not doing something. Right. So I'm gonna read it from refuses to, each one. Refuses to accept gifts or benefits with the implied expectation of influence. No, that's what you want. That's not a conflict. That's a good thing. That's acting ethically. Okay. Refuses to use authority or information to make a decision that affects the organization in an adverse manner. Again, no, that's what you want. You don't want him to refuse it. You want him to do that. Refuses to disclose to the appropriate authority any direct or indirect financial or personal interests. Well, yeah, that's one of the things. When you have a conflict, you're supposed to disclose it and then recuse yourself from the decision. So if someone is refusing to disclose the conflicts, then that's a problem. So C's looking good. And check D. Refuses to allow a friend to benefit from his or her authority. Yeah, that sounds like almost like a classic case of a conflict. So remembering refusing is kind of putting it in a direction I have to be careful of, but it looks to me like C is the problem. So I'm going to go with C.
I think the best part was when you kept reading that last refuses to, and to each one of those.
Yeah, because it reminded me that of what I was looking for. That I was looking for something that they were doing, not what they were doing, and that helped keep me out of trouble of going in the wrong direction on that one. All right, let's go to the next question. Healthcare executive with opposing duties. Heck's an opposing duty. Oh, it tells me meeting one makes it impossible to meet the other. Well, if you've had a managerial ethics class, you know that is basically the definition of a conflict of interest. So I see that's A, and I'm probably going with that. That definitely is the definition. Okay, but I'm going to check the other. Has a management ethical dilemma. Well, yeah, you do, but the dilemma you have is conflict of interest. Has a need for a consultant. No, you pretty much know what's right or wrong. You don't need a consultant. Responsibility to protect themselves. No, you're supposed to protect your organization. So B, C, and D don't look very good. So I'm going to stick with A, which is what I thought it was, just because I know what the definition of conflict. So I'm going to go with A. And by the way, I've seen that Nora put a link up to a patient Bill of Rights, so maybe something worth looking at. Remember that there are lots of patient Bill of Rights around. There's some in state laws. There's some professional organizations, some specific organizations, but they all pretty much are looking at generally the same type of thing. Thank you, Nora. Let's go with number 8. a non-legitimate reason. So again, I've got a negative here, non-legitimate reason to what? To release information from medical records. So, okay, so I know that I can release information, medical records legally and ethically in some cases, but here I'm going to look for something that is not a legitimate reason. Right, so releasing in a response to a subpoena, yeah, that's very legitimate because you're going to go to jail if you don't. Requested by the spouse or next of kin, maybe. The patient becomes incompetent. Well, you can't release it to everyone. It doesn't say who you're releasing it to. So it's not like just release it to the world. You can release it to some people. Probably not. Reporting statistics for a research project. Well, if it's non-patient identifiable, then you might be able to release it. So let's see, non-legitimate. So A and D are out. Again, I got two that I kind of like, both of them, that because they're gray areas. You can release it to the spouse or next of kin with permission or under some circumstances, but you can't just generally release it to them freely. Patient becoming incompetent, yeah, that doesn't give you enough. So I'm going to stick with B, although C's a tough one, but I think it's going to be B. Yeah, and someone points out that you do need the authorization form. You can't just freely give it to next of kin, but the patient can release the information, can give you the permission. The only place where that's not true is communicable diseases may allow you to do it under some circumstances.
Even though, Rick, you have the
Yeah.
power of attorney in case?
I'm sorry, say again?
Even though you have the power of attorney, that you are the,
Well, okay, the power of attorney, remember, only comes in if the patient is not able to make their own decisions. So they're setting up who can get information, who can make decisions if they can no longer do so. But if the patient is awake, competent, able to make their own decisions, then holding the power of attorney does not give you any power. Right. So it has to be only when the patient is becoming competent.
Okay.
Right. Number 9.
there's someone is raising a question,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hey. Hey, I had a question on the D answer, because this is a, I mean, I knew the answer, but D, if you could elaborate a little bit more where you could potentially release information based on research like the RRB or, national research projects by Health and Human Services. I guess that's kind of a gray area where people could easily mix that up. I'm not sure if you might have an explanation on that.
Yeah, the key here, Ron, is identifiable personal information, right? So if I were to release information with your name on it, then obviously that's wrong, right? I cannot do anything that identifies you, but I can identify you with more than just your name, right? So if I gave your address, if I give your age, if I give lots of other things, someone who's smart or has AI can connect those things and figure out who it is. So anything I release has to be scrubbed from anything that can be identifiable. So just as an example, I could say, okay, I'm going to do a study of average length of stay in the hospital for a particular DRG, right? So I run a chart of all the people with that particular DRG, and I then run their length of stay, and I can release that to a researcher with just those two data points. And if those are the only ones I have, there's no way you're going to figure out which was which patient, right? But if I start adding on a bunch of other things, then I'm at risk of releasing PHI that you don't want to do. Did that answer the question?
It did. Thank you.
You bet. let's go to number 9. Oh man, what's with all these negatives, right? Which of
Right?
the following is not an example of a breach of fiduciary duty? So I got to keep that in mind. I'm looking for saying that's not a breach of a fiduciary duty. And guess what? I need to know what a fiduciary duty is to know if I'm breaching it, right? So in my studying for this, I learned that a fiduciary duty is one where you have to make decisions that benefit someone else over yourself, right? So, for example, a doctor is not supposed to order additional procedures and operations and stuff in order to be able to buy a new boat, right? That's helping yourself, not the patient. You're supposed to be making the decisions for the patient based on their needs. So a fiduciary duty is any time you're making a decision to benefit another person. Okay, so I'm looking for, boy, that's a double negative, not a breach. I'm looking for something that is a fiduciary duty. Okay, so I have to keep that kind of double negative as I look at each one. So an executive who is distracted by a situation resulting in poor performance, that is absolutely a breach of fiduciary duty because you're not doing your job right. An executive whose judgment and effectiveness is impaired due to substance abuse, yeah, that's a breach of fiduciary duty. Okay. An executive who relies on subordinates to relay appropriate information. And I emphasize the word appropriate as I say that because I wanted to myself to make sure I was looking at appropriate, not inappropriate, right? If I let my subordinates relay inappropriate information, I'm breaching my fiduciary duty. But if I'm relying on them to, to give information to people, in an appropriate way, that seems like that's not a breach there. That's delegation. That's fine. So C looks right, but let's check D. An executive who fails to maintain competency in one's field. Yeah, ACHE would love you to take all the professional education you can because that is one of your fiduciary duties to your employer to maintain your competency. So A, B, and D are not breaches. Excuse me, it's not a breach of a fiduciary duty. So I'm looking at the not one. So I think it's got to be C, and I have to double check on the double negatives and not a breach. Not an example of a breach. So yeah, so I think it's going to be C. And it was. Let's do number 10.
That was a tough one. I kept getting twisted up too.
Yeah, it was really important to look at it. And again, you might want to think about, okay, just start with, is this a breach of a fiduciary duty? Yes, no, right? And then you can say, is it an example of a breach? So, but doing the true false, I think, helps you eliminate them that way. But this is a really weirdly worded question that you have to make sure you're keeping it straight in your mind.
Yeah, it started with a negative question, and you're looking for a negative answer, which is like an example of a breach of duty. So you're looking for the negative answers there. So it's confusing for me.
It absolutely is. Yeah, this is a weird one with double negatives, and sometimes you get those, and just recognize it and keep it straight. And like we've been saying, don't rush. You got plenty of time. Think about it. You've got note paper there. Write it down if you need to figure out which one is which. What I want to do with the negatives is I want to say, okay, what's the positive? What is a breach of a fiduciary duty? And I can use that. And then I say, okay, well, there's 3 that are not going to fit there. What's the one that is? Or vice versa. So that's what I'm going to do, is play around with it. But keep it careful, keep it straight. Do not rush yourself. Number 10. Now, this is one of those wonderful ones where you might say, well, why are we putting under professionalism and ethics instead of law? And there are overlaps. Last week, we talked about contracts under management when contracts can come under legal as well. So, just keep in mind that the categories are not absolute silos, but when you're taking the test, they don't label them by category anyway. It's just a prep thing. But here we're looking at the legal aspects of consent include all the following, except another negative. So I'm looking for things that are aspects of consent, right? So voluntary, yeah, consent has to be voluntary. Consent has to be informed. Consent does not have to be medically sound. That's not the consent. That's what you're consenting to. Hopefully what the doctor is telling you to do is medically sound, but that's not part of your consent. And then consent has to be competent. The person giving consent has to be, legally of age. They have to understand what's going on, all that stuff. So consent has to be voluntary, informed, and competent. Therefore, medical sound is the accept that I'm looking for. And I'm going to go with C. Hey, I'm on a roll today. I got 10 in a row.
I know.
I'm probably going to mess up the next one, right?
You jinxed yourself.
Probably. Take a break for a second. Any questions on ethics? Did we get anything else come in the chat room? I didn't see.
Rick, you did a great job of saying, ACHE has tons of information on ethics. I mean,
Yeah, they do. And they don't, it's not so much a theoretical, utilitarianism and, all those other things, but it's more practical. And it's the stuff that you should be able to apply. And I think what you see with a lot of questions is they're really things that you're applying. They're not so much asking the theory part of it.
And they do ask, there are some questions that come directly from the ACHE ethics statements.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The code of ethics is
Yeah.
really there, and they want to really promote that. So, okay, so again, you're seeing here the content of the laws and regulations section, and you can read all that yourself. But what I would recommend is, as you're preparing, make yourself a list of the laws you come across, right? So there are lots and lots and lots of laws out there, antitrust, conflict of interest, and Stark, some are general areas, some are very specific laws. And I think the specific ones are the ones that mess people up. So was it the Consolidated Omnibus Reconciliation Act, COBRA, of 1987 or 1993? I don't know if there was one in 93, but things like that. So as you run across them, make a list for yourself and then just write a couple of notes of what it is, and then use that list to kind of prepare. You're not going to memorize all of them, but again, do your best to be able to look at a law and say, okay, I recognize that one and where it applies to. Medicare, Medicaid, of course, you got to know, and that shows up on your health system as well. Confidentiality, like the one we just dealt with on the consent, is important. Both those areas, consent, confidentiality, and then we're back down again to patient rights. So I would take a look at those as well. But there are questions that get into the specific laws, so you need to at least make an attempt to figure out which one's which.
And Rick, just want to remind also that these laws and regulation also overlaps with human resources. There are some laws, regulations in human resources that overlaps with this body of knowledge.
Yeah, laws just seem to hit everywhere for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the questions. Let's go to the questions. Here's a question. Okay, federal regulations. Oh God. Keep in mind that state laws are not tested on this, so anything they ask specifically is going to be federal. But here we're saying federal regulations that govern all the clinical laboratory testing performed on humans. So we're looking at lab testing on people. Now I've got that word except there, but I'm not sure. That's not telling me that one of these is the one that doesn't apply. It's testing except for clinical trials and research. So that's one of those places where you see except and you have to see how it's being used. So what am I looking for? I'm looking for the federal regs about laboratory testing, I think. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of extra words in there, but it comes down to what are the regs about laboratory? Okay. So Joint Commission Laboratory. Why is that wrong? Well, because the Joint Commission, as powerful as they are not federal regulations. They're a private organization. So that one's false.
Accrediting agency.
Sorry?
They're accrediting agency.
Yeah, they're accrediting agency. They're not a regulating agency. College of American Pathologists, same thing. They're not the federal government. So we can eliminate that. Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments, CLIA. Okay, amendments. So that means it's amending a law. And the law was something about clinical laboratories. And I look back up at the question, we're saying clinical laboratory testing. So, by the way, I have absolutely no idea what the regs are about clinical laboratories. I don't do anything with labs. I try to avoid getting my blood drawn. If I have a question, I ask Michael, who actually knows this stuff. But I can still eliminate it, right? I can eliminate those first two easily. The third one, C, is looking pretty good. Oh, but food and drug. Wait a minute. Do they do laboratories? I don't know. I'm not sure. Huh. Wait a minute. Okay, I got it. The question is federal regulations, not federal regulator. Right? So the Food and Drug Administration is a regulator. It is not a regulation. So I'm going to cross that one out. I'm going to go with C. And I did that without knowing anything related to the answer. I honestly,
That was a
nothing
good
about
practice.
Yeah.
That was a
I
good
leave
practice.
that to people who like blood and chemical stuff and took science classes and things like that. But just by looking at what the question's really asking for, focusing on federal regulations, I was able to eliminate 3 of the 4. Right? So take your time, reason it out, and you should be able to get it. Okay. Next one, please.
Lots of words. Don't freak out. Lots of words.
So again, federal law. A patient comes to a hospital emergency department with an emergency condition. Right? So when I read patient comes to a hospital emergency department, in my mind, I instantly go to EMTALA because I know what EMTALA is. It's the federal law that says hospitals have to treat patients at the ED. So I'm thinking already, if this is EMTALA, what does that require? And that's what the question is asking is, when a patient comes to the ED with an emergency condition, what has to happen? Okay, so with few exceptions, the patient's ability to pay may be considered in determining whether to provide treatment. No, that's what EMTALA is trying to do, is stop you from looking at ability to pay first. So yeah, A is false. With few exceptions, the patient's condition must be stabilized before he or she is transferred or discharged. Yeah, I mean, that's what EMTALA is pushing for, is you've got to screen the patient and you got to stabilize them. Right? So B's looking good. A police officer may be asked to authorize treatment. Never. Almost never. So that one's wrong. It has nothing to do with federal law. So we're going to eliminate C. Hospital has no duty to treat a patient if he's not a patient or a member of Medical said, no, that's what EMTALA is doing. It's creating a duty to treat. So A's wrong, B looks good, C's wrong, D's wrong, right? So this required me to know something about EMTALA, to know about the law. But by knowing the basics of it, then I can narrow it down and say B is the right answer. And B is the right answer. Number 3. Oh, this is a trick question. Okay. So what law addresses the practice of dumping indigent patients? So dumping was when patients would show up at a hospital and they say, sorry, you don't have insurance, so you've got to go over to the county hospital instead. Right now, the reason that this is a trick question is that the right answer has 2 names. All right. And we were just talking about EMTALA as the law that requires them to provide treatment, that is to not dump the patient. Right. But EMTALA is not on that list. Right. So I'm going to go through those and see if I can figure it out. So ERISA. Right. So you see how you want to at least have a basic idea of what these different laws do. ERISA is related actually to retirement funds, but it also impacts provider or employer-based insurance. Nothing to do with dumping. We can get rid of that. COBRA, that's the Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, if you like long names. Well, what does budget reconciliation have to do with patient dumping? And you might be tempted to say, no, I don't think so. But from your studies and the list of laws you put together, you might know that COBRA is a long bill, includes lots and lots of things. And one of the things it included was EMTALA. EMTALA was a subsection of COBRA that year that they stuck it in order to pass it. So I'm pretty sure B is going to be the right answer. I have absolutely no idea what PARCA is. I don't know if it's made up or not. Maybe it's real. I never heard of it, so I'm not
I
going to.
think that's the Patient Access to for Reportable Care Act. PARCA.
No, no, that you're talking about PARCA.
Yeah,
It's the ACA.
Possible
Yeah,
Care Act.
ACA. So that was wrong. So yeah, so no, that I don't know what it is. Hill-Burton was a grant program back in the 50s and 60s that gave money to communities to build hospitals and clinics. Nice law. It did actually create an obligation for those hospitals to treat patients who couldn't pay, but it wasn't dumping them. Many of them were public hospitals. So D's kind of related, but it's not there really for the dumping. So I know it's not A. I know it's not D. I have no idea what C is. Even if I wasn't sure that B was related, I can say, well, I can't find a reason why it's wrong. I guess the same for C. I can't figure out a reason it's wrong. But I do know that EMTALA is part of COBRA. So I'm going to go with B. Number 4. Laws about medical records. So ownership and control of the medical records. Who owns the medical records? Who controls them? And you might be thinking, well, patients have a right to access their medical information, which they do under federal and state laws. You can read your own records, but who actually owns them? Okay, and then I notice it's hospital delivered services. So I may have missed that the first time, but I would have come back to it because the first 2 choices are hospital and physician. And if I hadn't noticed it was hospital delivered services, I might wonder, well, why isn't it the physician? Well, if it's in the physician's office, then the physician's going to own the records. But if it's hospital delivered services, the hospital owns it. So the provider who creates the record owns it, but the patients have right to the information. So A's looking good. B's not going to be good because it's the hospital, not the physician. Patient never owns the record, just the information. Insurer has a right to some information and sufficient to bill, or to pay rather, but they don't own the record, so it's got to be A. And it is. And you notice, even when it's really obvious and A is the first one I read and I think it's the right answer, I still want to take the time to look at the others and make sure. All right, so again, I keep saying it over and over again, do not rush.
Hey, Rick, quick question. What does control of medical records involve? Because we just talked about patients' right to the information, but part of the right is also telling whether a patient can or is willing to share that information with others, right?
Yeah, well, it's not willing to, they have to, whether they're willing to or not. And of course, many providers would really prefer you never look at your record. Not mentioning my local hospital by name, but control is more, I think, the way I'm interpreting in this, and that may be wrong, but my interpretation is control of the physical document or the physical computer style now on Epic, file on Epic. They're controlling the physical record, not the information. Right? That's how I'm interpreting it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Because control also is related to liability. If you're the controller of the medical records, if there's something happens, like, PHI is accidentally released, it's your responsibility.
Yeah, that's true too. Or if you burn the record before the end of the period, you keep it.
Or if you're changing from one database to another database or from one system to another system, it's your responsibility to make it sure that you have to get all of those old data to the new system. So that's why you are the one who controls all of them.
Otherwise, you're going to have an Epic lawsuit. Sorry.
Yeah.
Number 5, before I make other bad jokes. Okay, well, this is one we keep talking about. I think we got a bunch of extra questions on this one. So the rules governing the acceptance and treatment of emergency patients. You notice the problem here? We said that includes EMTALA, but we said EMTALA is part of COBRA. Uh-oh. I'm going to take a look at the others, see if that helps me. EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity something, Commission. Yeah, nope, that's not it. Eliminate B. Stark 2 is the one on physicians referring to medical facilities they own, so that's not it. And again, important to know which the different laws are, the main laws. All right, so I'm going to eliminate B and C. And now I've got a choice that I think both of them are right. Right. So
Which one is more right?
well, that's the question, right? So COBRA is broader, right? We said look at broad ones, but it's less specific. It doesn't cover just emergency patients. It covers a lot of other things. So it's not broad in that sense. So even though it's right, I think EMTALA is more right. Right. So again, I've got it down to 50-50 here, but I'm definitely leaning to EMTALA. Maybe it's 60-40. So I'm going to go with A.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tricky question just because they have 2 right answers, but you got to make a judgment of which one's more right.
Isn't it, Rick? Correct me if I'm wrong. COBRA was the original act, and EMTALA comes after COBRA.
Now, EMTALA was included within COBRA. So
Okay.
COBRA was this giant law. The word omnibus means that they've got a whole bunch of laws they want to get through. They're at the end of the session. So they combine them. And here we have a combined omnibus. They put 2 omnibus bills together. And it just included, lots and lots of different laws within that single act. It's one of those things Congress does when they can't get their act together. Huh, wonder when that is. Anyway, so yeah, so EMTALA is the actual law relating to it, but it was passed as part of COBRA.
Okay.
Number 6. Oh God, lots of words. Uh-oh. Okay, joint venture laboratory. It's owned by both a hospital and its medical staff physicians. All right, so I'm picturing the laboratory and I got the ownership there, the hospital and physicians, but I don't know what the question is yet. What's the question? Oh, violation of fraud and abuse laws. So, excuse me, fraud and abuse is one of the big categories of laws. And as you saw in the video, I broke it into different sections, different types of laws, different focuses, and fraud and abuse is one of the big ones. So, okay, so what would make the hospital and the physicians in violation of fraud and abuse? All right, so marketed services to both investors and non-investors. I can't see anything wrong with that. Offer ownership shares at the same price to referrers and non-referrers. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think that's fraud. Probably not. Require investors to refer business to it. And now the light that just went off should be Stark, right? Stark. Yes, someone says Stark, I think. Stark, you are correct. The Stark laws, and there's Stark 1, Stark 2, and Stark 3. Stark 1 was only laboratories owned by physicians. Stark 2 included lots and lots of medical services, imaging, durable medical equipment, a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
And it says you can't require, or you can't refer, if you're a physician, you can't refer patients under most circumstances to something that you own, right? So if you write a lab slip and say, get this test and go to the laboratory I own, well, microeconomics suggests that you're going to write a lot more lab orders in that case if you own the lab. And that's what was happening. So we got the Stark law. So if you're requiring investors to refer business, you're going to be in violation of Stark. So I'm pretty sure 6C is going to be the right answer here, but I'm going to check on D. Base its profit distribution on amount of capital, not on referrals. No, that's what you want. You make a profit, you give out the profit to your investors, but it's distributed on how much they invested, not on referrals. If you give an incentive to them to refer, then you're going to be in violation of a couple of different federal laws. So you want to not do that. So A's wrong, B's wrong, D's wrong, C's right.
So Rick, there's a question. Yeah.
And so the question is, if there was a financial incentive for referral, it might be a kickback violation. It depends how it's structured. So a kickback is, if you agree to refer these to me, I will give you some money back, right? So, versus Stark, which just says you can't do it, right? So kickback, you have to look a little more of where the money is flowing, but it's certainly potentially there as a kickback as well. So that's where you want to look at it. If it was D, you're distributing the profits based on referrals, then that would be a kickback for sure, because for every patient you refer, you get the profit kicked back to you. So yeah, so it depends on it, but C is definitely wrong. B, they're doing it right. They're just distributing on the basis of capital contributed. So let's take a look. I think it's C, right? Yep, it is. Number 7. Oh God, another one with lots of words. In general, that means they're telling you right ahead, this is not going to be black and white. There's shades of gray here. In general, courts exhibit what attitude during or regarding controversies about medical staff privileges. So I'm getting a picture in my head. A doctor has applied for medical staff privileges. For some reason, it got turned down. The doctor sues. So what's the court going to do? So human lives are at stake, and the courts must intervene to protect physician rights to save those lives. Well, no, not necessarily, because maybe the medical staff privileges were turned down because the patient or the physician kills lots of patients. So that doesn't help. If the decision were supported by reasonable evidence, courts will not substitute their judgment for that of the hospital board. Remember that it's the governing board that actually makes the final decision about staff privileges, not the medical staff. And said if it was supported by reasonable evidence. Now, that's making me think about, okay, was there due process? Did the person get turned down for a stupid reason or a good reason? And that just makes sense to me that if the hospital had a good reason for turning down the staff privileges, the court's going to accept it. They're not going to substitute their judgment for what should be an expert decision or an informed decision. So B's looking good. Hospitals must not be permitted to interfere with the doctor-patient relationship. Well, no, hospitals have standards for medical staff, and if your doctor doesn't have privileges here, then you can go to another hospital with that doctor, but we're not going to just let any doctor on our staff. So C's not going to be right. Courts may not entertain suits regarding medical staff privileges. Courts can entertain suits about anything. So that's too absolute for me. Courts may not entertain suits there. They may, say we don't want to get involved here, but it's not that they won't look at it all. So A is a bad one. C and D don't look really good. But B looks like the argument I would want. I would want hot courts to say, yeah, show me that you had good reasons for doing it. And if so, we're going to trust you. We're going to let you do it. So I'm going to go with B. And that was right. And there is a question in the thing, can you explain fraud, waste, and abuse? Yeah, I keep thinking back to a professor I had in grad school who was talking about that. And he said that the important thing is remember fraud, waste, and abuse are three separate words. And don't listen when people say fraud, waste, and abuse because they're thinking it's one thing. Fraud is a violation of law, right? You're lying basically to get money. Waste is just being inefficient. And abuse is saying like, abuse of privilege, or maybe it's stealing by using your powers. But again, you got three different things going on there. Ron, did that answer it?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
You bet. All right, number 8.
Can I add to that fraud and abuse?
Sure, please.
So a example for fraud or an abuse is if you are changing, ICD codes or different diagnosis or CPT codes just to get more money or reimbursement. So those are some.
That's fraud for sure. Yeah, upcoding.
Yeah,
upcoding is a form of fraud.
Yeah, mostly. Yeah.
Lots of ways of doing fraud. And you can make really good money doing fraud if you don't mind the risk of going to jail, but definitely some money available there. Lots of people try it. Thrust of antitrust legislation. Now, most normal people hate antitrust. I don't, right? And in fact, that's what first got me interested in going to law school, was learning about antitrust law. So I'm a little weird on that, but it's also because I really like economics, and antitrust is the overlap of law and economics. So, okay, so the thrust of antitrust legislation as applied to healthcare. That's a pretty general question. So what are we doing here in healthcare that's antitrust? Well, what is antitrust first? Think about that. So antitrust laws are trying to make the marketplace work, the economic marketplace. So what are we doing in healthcare for antitrust? So, right now we're hearing antitrust laws about Google and I don't know, various other high-tech things, and it's often coming down to money. Well, it's always coming down to money, but where's the money flowing here? So contain costs. Ooh, well, yeah. I mean, if you have a monopoly, you probably think that costs are going to go up. That's a bad thing. So that's a maybe. Contain rising costs of independent single unit hospitals. Well, no, that's probably the opposite, because antitrust looks at things like mergers and joint ventures, things like that, to see if you're eliminating competition. But if you've got an independent hospital, they're competing with other hospitals, that's fine. It's when they start merging into the chains that you ask questions. So B is going to be wrong. Monitor the scope of health services provided in a given area. I do not even know what that means. Antitrust law doesn't monitor anything. They just deal with issues of the marketplace. So, is an action by someone in the marketplace upsetting the marketplace? So, yeah, C doesn't make sense. So I'm going to eliminate that. Protect the public's economic interest. Now that's broad. And is that the same as C? So is A. A is containing costs. B is economic interest. And cost is one economic interest. But is that the same thing? So I'm thinking, what else is there? Well, we've got cost as an issue, but we also have quality as an issue, right? And if you have two hospitals competing, maybe they're going to be competing on not just cost, but on quality, right? Maybe they're going to be competing on access to care. Well, those are also part of the economic interest. And if we're looking at all the bad things that might happen from a merger, cost is only one of them. So cost is right, but it's included within D. So I'm going to go with D here as the more inclusive answer.
So, when I talk about usually the broadest answer is the most correct, I wonder if we should change that to most inclusive.
I think so, because here it's not so much that it's broad. The other one we had earlier was broad, but it was wrong. We want to say more specific.
Yeah.
The fact that this isn't that cost is included within economic interest, but there are others, makes it a better answer.
Or probably we can use both, inclusive and broadest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Number 9.
Ooh, lots of words.
Yeah, that was what I was about to say. So, okay, 2 independent health organizations. So in my mind, I've got a picture of 2 hospitals up there, and they're interested in discussing a joint venture. All right, so to initiate a cancer treatment program. So they're going to set up a new program that they're running jointly. That's the picture I've got in my head. Still don't know the question. I've just got the picture. I don't have the question. Okay, would be wise to initially consult with their legal counsel. Oh, okay. So the question is, why should they ask their attorney something? Well, as an attorney, always, right? I mean, you should always consult with your attorney. But why specifically here? Why do you consult with an attorney about a joint venture? So, okay, liability is equal even though disproportionately shared. Potentially true, right? Joint and several liability, you could both get liable, right? Regardless of which share of the stock you own. But that's not a specific reason to ask your attorney about it. It's just a fact. Financial gains or losses can be shared unequally. I don't know if that's because the joint venture has different shares or what, but again, not a issue to ask counsel about and is initially consult. So it sounds like it's early. That's saying you're negotiating down the road. So that one's probably not a good answer. Discussions might violate antitrust statutes. Yeah, anytime you're doing something with one of your competitors, there's a risk that you are going to violate antitrust. And talking to each other might be a conspiracy and restraint of trade, right? So that's the fear, is that you're going to agree either to divide the market up, you do the specialty, we'll do that specialty, or you agree on what prices you're going to give to Blue Shield, and that's a definite violation. So there's ways of having joint ventures. It's not that you can't do them, but you want to make sure before you sit down and start talking to each other that your conversation's not going to violate the law. So that would probably be a good reason to talk to your lawyer first, or at least early. So C's looking good. Current facilities can accommodate the program. Great question to ask your strategic planning people, not a question to ask your lawyer. They don't know anything about that, not their job. So A, B, and D don't look good. C does look good. So let's go with C. Hey, Nora, do I have a HIPAA question somewhere?
I don't recall, but I know we have a HIPAA joke in our future.
I know. I don't want to give the joke till I have the question. Let's see what number 10 is. Let's see if I get HIPAA somewhere. If
Okay.
not, I'm just going to tell the joke. Go to question 10. All right, no, it's not a HIPAA question, so I got to tell it. So, okay, everyone knows that HIPAA, of course, is the privacy rule, and that it's spelled with one P and two A's, not two P's, one A, as my students like doing. So, knock, knock, Nora.
Who's there?
HIPAA.
HIPAA who?
I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to tell you that.
10
Now, I've
years
been
I've
telling
known
that
this
joke
joke and it
twice a
cracks me
year
up.
to Nora for 10 years, and she still cracks up every time, so I have to tell it.
Fun fact. So my mom was in the hospital this past week, and every single clinician I met, I told them that joke. Cracked them up, broke the ice right away. Just, it's great. Love it.
And it got through their HIPAA-noia, their paranoia about HIPAA.
Yeah.
I better not say anything. I might violate the law. Okay, well, we didn't get a HIPAA question. We have one about liability here, so I guess I'll answer that without any jokes. Okay, which of the following is a clear trend regarding hospital liability for actions of its members? So what's jumping out of me here first is I'm looking for when is the hospital liable for what the doctors do, but I'm also looking for what's the clear trend, right? Because that's been changing. So what are the trends going on here? Hospital may be liable for physician's negligence, even though the physician is an independent contractor. So yeah, usually you're only liable if they're either a staff or an agent, but we have this concept called ostensible agency, where a reasonable person might think the person worked for you, like an ED physician has your name on their name tag. So yeah, so you may be liable for their action even if they're an independent contractor. A is possible. Hospitals are not liable for such actions because they are simply physical sites where patients receive treatment from privately retained physicians. Yeah, back in 1910, that was the rule. I think we don't have that anymore, but that's certainly what it used to be. So it's the trend away from that, not the trend to it. So that's going to be wrong. And I have to remind myself I'm looking for trends here. Hospitals are becoming more reluctant to impose liability on hospitals for negligent physicians. So you notice A and C are opposite, right? Well, I think the trend is that they're more liable. So I'm going to say A is better than C. I'm going to eliminate C. Hospital is liable only if the physician is an employee. No, not true. They can be an agent. They can be an ostensible agent. That one's wrong. So yeah, D or A is the one that looks right. And again, I've got two trends, A and C. I've got opposite trends, but I believe that A is the actual real trend right now, where C was going back the other way. So I'm gonna go with A.
Amen.
This question here, A may and D is only. Yeah, that's a
Yes,
good point also.
keywords.
Thanks, Rod. That's a really good point. That A is it may be liable. It's not necessarily always liable, where D is giving us an absolute only if the physician employee. And yeah, they are liable if the physician's an employee, but not only. There's the other reasons as well. Good call on that, Ron. All right. Any questions people have about law? How did we not have a HIPAA question?
I
Man,
know. We need to fix that.
please do.
Someone is stealing your HIPAA joke, Rick.
Yeah, I know. We'll talk about that. I've got to copyright it, and there's a fee. I stole it from someone else, so you're welcome to it as well. Okay, deep breath here.
2-minute break, 1-minute break, all right.
Nora said she was going to bring me more coffee, but problem with being 2 hours away, I guess. All right, so our third area today is governance and organizational structure. And the thing to concentrate here is the triad, right? The administration, the board, the medical staff, and their leaders, board chair, CEO, medical staff, president. But what does each of them do? And I think if I was trying to organize my thoughts to do this, I would ask, what are the roles of each of those three in the organization? Right, that's it, structure everything around that, and then you can look at how do bylaws come into play, who approves medical staff structure, those types of things. But think about the triad as your focus here. Okay, number one. Oh, and committees, of course, because we can't function without committees. The finance committee is responsible for. So yeah, okay, I got to know what each of the committees does. So monitoring budget performance, maybe, yeah. Finance budget sounds right. Awarding CEO increases and bonuses, yeah, no, that's not the finance committee, that's the whole board. Acting on behalf of the board in their absence. Well, no, we might delegate to a subcommittee, but it's not going to be the finance committee doing that. I don't think any hospital would do that. Permitting joint ventures, again, board function. Board's going to approve strategic initiatives, not the one committee of the board. So finance might recommend a CEO increase. They might recommend a joint venture, but they're not the ones who get the power to do it. So of these three, I mean, three of them just don't look like finance functions. It leaves me with A, monitoring budget performance, and I guess I'm going to go with that one because I don't like the other three. Next. The most critical. Again, so this is one that you're gonna potentially have an argument about, right? What makes something more critical than something else? And says requires tenured board members. And I have to, being an academic type, I have to look at that word tenured and remind myself that outside of the university, tenured means how long you've been there, not that you were granted tenure. So most critical committee that requires board members who've been there a long time. Okay. Audit committee, no. I mean, if we can bring in a new person who's an auditor and an accountant type, I don't think they have to be there a long time. Same with finance. I don't see any argument there for being there a long time. Nominating committee, What's the benefit of having people been there a long time? Well, they know the needs. Maybe they have contacts. So maybe. Executive committee. Now, it seems like executive committees where you want your most experienced people, probably. So A and B, I'm definitely crossing off. D, I can see an argument for it, but D seems like it's got the stronger argument of why you want people with long range. So if I was taking the test, I would probably put down D. But I think I remember seeing this question before and I got it wrong. So I think the answer is really C, and I have no idea because I think D is a better answer. But let's see what they say. Yeah, they say C. Anyone know the reason for that?
So according to in the well-managed healthcare organization on page 119,
Thank
there's
you,
a whole section on the role of the nominating committee. And they want fresh ideas. Long story, lots of reasons, but he goes into depth in here.
Yeah, I still think they're wrong. I still think it's D, but everyone else seems to think it's C, including the experts there. So I guess C is the right answer.
I think C because I think they need to be more tenured or be in that committee because they know what's happening with the organizations.
They know its needs.
What's happening with the organizations.
Yeah,
Here it
they
says-
know what kind of expertise you want to
Yes,
bring onto the
and they
board.
know what they need, something like that.
Yeah, maybe.
So they monitor the board's self-evaluation and resolve issues of conflict of interest. And it's common to put former officers on the nominating committee to emphasize continuation of the status quo in the organization.
I guess I
Basically,
can't argue with that, but I would have put down D if I was taking the test. I would have gotten this wrong for sure. And the reason it stood out to me is because I remember it in the past that I got it wrong. So yeah,
Well,
committee.
Right. Well, again,
and
this is about the tenured.
Yeah, how long you've been there.
Right.
And a good point,
And-
place to point out that the well-managed healthcare organization, if you only look at one source, is probably the one you want. The only thing it doesn't really cover well is the professionalism ethics and the legal stuff. So that place you'll need outside, but other than that, it's really good.
And I've seen also in some organizations wherein they have qualifications and requirements for nominating committee that you need to be at least be with the organization or the board with that organization within 3 to 5 years, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe. Number 3. So duty of loyalty. So anyone who works in an organization has a duty of loyalty to that organization. That is, you're not supposed to do things that hurt your employer or help its competitors. Right. So duty of loyalty requires that a board member discloses all of their assets. Well, if so, you would not have any board members if you had to do that. So yeah, A is wrong. That's just too much. A board member belongs to as few healthcare organizations as possible. I don't think so. I mean, you want people who are involved in things. I don't know why you want B. Board member refrains from conflicts of interest. Well, yeah. A conflict of interest is when you can't fulfill your obligation to both the board that you're on and to some outside interest. So, example, if you're the hospital's banker and you're on the hospital's board and the hospital is negotiating a loan, you can't get the maximum interest rate on behalf of the hospital, of the board, of the bank rather, and the lowest interest rate on behalf of the hospital. That's a conflict of interest. You can't do both. So yeah, it requires that you refrain from conflict of interest. That one looks good. Requires that you serve out your entire term. It would be nice, but I don't know that that's loyalty. So A is wrong, B is wrong. D's just not that good an answer. I don't think it's that strong. So C is the one that is the strongest answer, as well as being correct. So I'm going to go with C. So here we're back to the triad. the CEO of a hospital reports to. Who is the CEO's boss? And maybe a little tricky because, you know, who does the CEO talk to? Probably several times a week, the board chair. But is that really where you report to? So I don't think so. And I don't think it's the executive committee. It's definitely not the compensation evaluation committee. You want to keep them happy, but no, you report to the entire board. And that's the structure of an organization. Is the board is responsible for hiring and firing the CEO. So you were reporting to the entire board, even if you talk to the chair a lot. And Ron's saying the CEO could also be the board chair. Possible. I'm not sure that's the best governance structure, but we do know there are organizations where the CEO is given both titles. But even so, it's the board that has to elect that person there, choose that person. So they're the ones who could get rid of that person as well.
Just a commentary on that. I think mostly the CEO is the board chair for profit organization, but just an FYI, most of the questions are for nonprofit organization.
Yeah, I think, Michael, I think you're right on both those. That would be more likely in a for-profit. So, yeah. Right. So is D the right answer? It is. Report to the entire board. Well, this goes back to the same type of thing we we're just talking about. So regarding hiring employees, board should be intimately involved. So which position should the board really be involved in hiring? Well, if I'm the CEO, I want them out of the weeds as much as possible. Right? But they do have ultimate responsibility. So I've got kind of a balancing act there. So, okay. Should they be involved in hiring all management personnel? Well, no, that's the CEO is going to hire and then be accountable for them. All employees within the organization. I mean, do you really want your board having to interview and hire people, say, in housekeeping or food services or, you know, any of the patient care areas? No. Does the board hire the CEO? Yes, that's its number one job. So the board is intimately involved in hiring the CEO. That one looks good. All clinical personnel know, same as B. They're not going to get that much into the weeds. So they're going to keep, you want the board to be at a very high level. They hire the CEO and delegate the rest of the operation to that person. And then they oversee that person. So, you know, A, B, and D are way more than any board can do in a large size organization. So let's go with C. I'm currently the board chair for a nonprofit, a homeless shelter, and it's transitioning from being all volunteer to having paid staff. And we just hired our first executive director. And one of the things I have to do is keep getting the board members out of the weeds, out of the day-to-day stuff, and say, no, that's why we hired the CEO. So the executive director, you got to let her do it. We're just going to ask her what she's doing, and that's all. That's our job. All right, number 6. Board member serves as the medical director of competing organization. Well, yeah, that's not a good thing, right? When you have people in leadership in competing organizations, that's a problem. So which of these duties is applicable to the situation? So basically, what general principle are they violating? I mean, they got a conflict of interest here. Right? Duty of care. Duty of care means you're supposed to do a good job. Supposed to do your job right. Duty of obedience. What? I don't think that's a board duty. I think that's, you know, training your dog maybe, but we don't have a lot of obedience in healthcare, do we? So that's not it. Business judgment rule. That's a liability thing that if you made a decision as a board and it was a reasonable decision, even if it turned out to be wrong, you're not liable for it. So that one's wrong. Duty of loyalty. Yeah. So are you loyal to both organizations? That's getting into the conflict. Your loyalty to the organization, you're a member of the board, and your loyalty to the organization for whom you're the medical staff or the medical director, that's going to create the conflict and you're going to have a problem with it. So I'm going to go with D. So I think you're seeing some of the terminology, like the different duties and stuff, that you probably want to at least have a good idea of what they are. I don't know the business judgment really shows up much, but you want to know about duty of loyalty, duty of care, things like that. And certainly conflict of interest shows up. Number 7. Danger of having a large board greater than 17. So I don't know. I mean, there's no perfect size of a board, and depending who you ask, you'll get all sorts of different answers. But they're saying, you know, what are the problems? Not absolute, you don't do it, but what's the danger if you have a board that's greater than 17? Well, you can never have a quorum. That's certainly possible if you need, you know, you need to get 9 of the people there out of the 17 to have a quorum, or whatever your number is. The more people you have, the harder it is to get them all in the room at the same time. Yeah. Board will not be able to elect a chair. So what if you have 435 people and you need 217 of them? Might be a problem, but most organizations, that's not an issue. There will be too many committees. Not necessarily. Maybe you have enough people to serve on all the committees. I mean, it's not a per se thing that you're going to have too many committees just by having more people. So that doesn't sound right. Executive committee will make all the important decisions. Again, it could happen with any size. It doesn't seem to me that D is driven by the number of people. And actually, I'll say that about B, C, and D, that it's not the number of people. You may have other things causing those 3, but it's not the size of it. But the practical thing of just getting them all in the room at the same time is certainly there as it gets bigger and bigger. So I'm going to go with A.
Is there an expectation that irrespective of the size of the board, the executive committee has the final say or the decision?
I think that the board, you know, in the bylaws, the organization bylaws could delegate certain functions to the executive committee or allow them to make decisions between board meetings, maybe. But again, I don't see it as necessarily the size that's driving that.
What's the answer, by the way?
So,
All right, I'm wrong. This is the first one I've been totally wrong on, other than one I argue with.
again, in the well-managed healthcare organization, he does talk about size of the boards and saying that particularly, you know, the larger they get, ends up most of the decisions will be made by the executive committee.
Interesting.
So there's a detailed explanation in there. He doesn't specifically see 17, or at least not in the version that we have.
I think in the previous version, they the size, the number that is ideal is between 8 to 12.
Okay.
Board
Yeah,
size.
I've heard that number. I've also heard, you know, 8 to 15 or 12 to 15. I don't think there's a magic number, but, you know, just that the smaller you are, the less likely it is that you've got multiple viewpoints being brought in. The larger it is, the harder it is to get people together.
It might come up in the exam, but just in between that range. Probably if you have a selection that's in between that range, probably it's the best, you know.
Yeah, if it's asked, it's somewhere, the correct answer will probably be in that range. So I'm thinking, why will the executive can make the important decisions? It's probably because you couldn't get everyone else together. So I'm kind of thinking that A and D are still related, but
Well, it does
I
say
guess I
here
got it
that
wrong.
on the larger boards, most of the members end up being, you know, honorific board
Yeah.
members as opposed to actually experts in their
Right,
field.
when you get the 50 people, because all of your donors want to be listed on being on the board, but they only meet once a year. Something like that.
So this section in the well-managed healthcare organization is a really good one.
Maybe I'll read it before next year. Go to number 8. Which of the following should be included in an organization's mission statement? So yeah, mission, vision, values, you got to know what they are, what's included. So which of these are included in your mission statement? Ethics. Now that's interesting. I know a faith-based hospital that very much includes their ethics within their mission statement. And the interesting thing is that they really live it. It really drives that organization. So maybe which services you provide. Yeah, I mean, we're here to do this specific service, you know, maybe to this specific patient or patient group. So B sounds like possible. C is, I think it's probably more in your vision statement of where are we going in the future? What's our strategy to get there? I think C is probably not as good as B. And facilities, now it's too specific. You don't necessarily have to say what your facility is to say what you do. Unless, of course, it's, you know, like running a national park where that is your mission, but I don't think that's going to be it. So I'm kind of stuck between A and B, and I think you're more likely to be talking about B. You know, what do we do as an organization? Ethics is how we do it, maybe. So I'm not totally jumping into B, but I think it's a stronger answer. And I think I'm going to put down B. That might be one of the ones where I mark it and I come back later. If I'm torn between two, you know, let me get the other ones now and I'll come back and I'll flip my coin later on, or I'll think it through more. But if I'm staring at it and I'm really caught and I just can't decide which is right, the nice thing with the test center is you can just mark it and then come back at the end and play around with some more, because once again, you've got plenty of time.
Yeah. So probably the ethics is related to the values of the organization, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that it's going to show up in a value statement. And yeah, I just keep thinking about this one hospital that I work with, but where it does show up in their mission statement too. But yeah, it's probably, I think you're right, it's more likely to show up in a value statement.
Value statement, yeah.
Yeah, as a standalone, but it'd be nice to talk about how ethical we are, but maybe not. Oh, lots of words again. Okay. Process of validating, that's an interesting word, validating a professional's eligibility for medical staff privileges and membership. What are they asking? Do you notice that I hate this question? There's no verb in there, right? What's the action I'm being asked about? I think what they're saying is, what is the process of validating a person? So there's a lot of words there trying to figure it out. So it's like, okay, the process includes looking at their academic preparation, their licensing, their training, et cetera, but that's what they're asking. What is it? What is the process? So privileging, I don't think it's called that. Maybe verification goes beyond that, but you are verifying that they actually do have a license and education, but that's not what it's called. Credentialing is what I usually hear it called. When you credential someone, you give them privileges. Education, authentication, again, that's part of it, that it's not the whole process. And they're talking about what is this entire process, including all these things. So I don't like D. I don't like B. I think A and C, it depends what an organization calls it, but I'm thinking it's kind of a gut reaction because I don't do this stuff. That C is the term I hear more. For credentialing is what you do, and then privileges is what they get. So yeah, I may mark this one and come back, but I'm pretty sure it's C. And it is.
I think you did a good job, because I kept leaning towards privileging, but it's like,
Can
They
I
don't-
can I add something on this?
go ahead.
Yeah.
So credentialing and privileging are two terms that they are using in governing governance. So if you are a new physician, you need to go first. The step is credentialing. So you need to be credentialed. They will verify your academic profession, licensing, training, etc. Once it is validated, you go through privileging. So the privileging is a process wherein they will privilege you to do certain areas, like if you are privileged to do medicine, like in the ER or something the specialties that you are supposed to perform in the hospital. So that's the process of privileging.
So privileging is more specific.
Yeah.
And it takes place after the credentialing.
Yes,
Okay.
it takes up. You cannot be privileged until you are credentialed. So that's why it will take probably several weeks before you can start. 4 to 6 weeks, because we have to look at your credential in the National Data Bank, Physicians National Data Bank. It's a federal, and after that, it's cleared. If you are cleared, then you go through a privileging process.
Thank you. I didn't know that. All right, number 10. Now we're back to mission statement. Should specify which 3 things. So anytime you got these lists, I hate them. I really hate these questions, but they're there. So I'm looking at the first one basically and saying, is it there? And if not, I'm going to move on to another one. So does the mission statement include long-range plans? Well, no, that's your vision statement. And then look, the rest of it doesn't include accreditation body, doesn't include profit margin. That's not your mission. So toss that one. Okay. Does it include the community to be served? Yes, it does. Does it include scope of service? Yeah, probably. Does it include financial constraints? Yes, sort of, maybe, kind of. Okay. B, I'm going to hold on. Let's see, number C, does it include joint ventures? Could, I mean, it's possible. Does it include employee satisfaction rating? No, that's much too specific. Oh, there's scope of service again, so that's showing up twice. But yeah, it's definitely not doing employee satisfaction. It might be the other two. So we'll get rid of C. Okay, long-range plans. Probably not again. That's probably going to be vision. Joint ventures, maybe. Employee satisfaction again, no, I'm going to cross it out just for that. So employee satisfaction is showing up in C and D. So I can eliminate it based on that. So I'm down to A and B, and A's got the long-range plan, which is mission or vision rather. Accreditation, which has nothing to do with it. Profit, usually we're not listing in our mission. So yeah, community to be served, scope of practice, and then I guess within our financial constraints makes sense. So let's go with B, which is right. By the way, I'm talking out loud as I do this, but if I did that in the test center, they'd probably get really mad at me. So I'm talking inside my head instead, is what I'm doing, but I am actually doing this type of talking inside my brain. So
several people that have passed the exam after our sessions have said that they channel Rick's voice in their head. So that works.
Psychiatrists probably have a name for that, but I don't know what it is.
But
Okay.
it works.
Was that our last one there? Yeah. So let's open up for any questions at this point. Ron.
Hey everyone, really in tune with this session, so really great material. Thanks very much. By the way, Rick, I've taken the exam before, and unfortunately I was not successful, just because it was bad timing. But I remember there was some questions regarding ACHE's governance structure, with governors and whatnot. I'm wondering maybe if someone can kind of chime in and kind of give us a rundown on how that works, how elections of boards are, for ACHE. I think that was a question.
Huh.
You are correct. And thank you for reminding us of that. They do want to know how the ACHE board is structured, or the governance. And that you can find in about ACHE. They do talk about governments and
On ACHE's website, you mean?
yeah. Mhm.
Yes, could be there.
They talk about Board of Governors. They talk about the Council of Regents, committee rosters, bylaws and regulations.
One of the early prep materials, and this is like way back, asked about the volunteer recognition program and how many points you needed to get each of the awards.
Oh, really?
And I hope to hell they don't have that. It's like a stupid question to ask, but doesn't mean it's not there. But I just don't know why you need to know that when there's so much other stuff.
So yeah, they do a really good job of providing the background. Again, it's, back in my day, it was all paper. I mean, there was no website. I mean, this is amazing that they've got this.
But it's just one of those things that you have to think about that you might need that I wouldn't have thought about. So, Ron, when did you take it before?
Fun fact: the current chair of the governors is Delvecchio Finley, who used to be one of us in Cal. So he's gone on to great things, but we're so proud of him.
Yes, the first meeting of the Cal Board of Directors, everyone went around the table introducing themselves and said, "How did you get involved here?" And almost everyone answered, "Well, Delvecchio called me and I made the mistake of answering the phone." And Delvecchio did not take no for an answer. If he wanted you, he got you. So yeah, great guy, really good vision of where we're going. So he is the person who I think set up Cal. Really did.
So Ron, I think what we're going to do then is also add in one of the highlights about
the structure.
Yeah.
Structure.
Ron, when did you take the test?
Oh, some time ago. May of 2021.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a couple years ago. Yeah. Anything else you're doing different now than before in terms of prep that you would pass on?
Well, I mean, my tip is as soon as I understood like my areas of weakness, my squirrel brain tried to photographically memorize it and get to my car and write down some questions right away so I can look into it. So, but what I'm doing now is just really focusing on the areas that I lacked on, and one of them was governance and organizational structures. Another was like quality and laws and regulations, which is just focus on the weak areas, if you would.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And no one is really strong in all 10 areas, I think. I know I'm certainly not. And when I took the test, I spent a lot of time on finance, on quality, and on HR, because it's stuff I never do and I never think about. So if you can identify, if you do that self-assessment, you can identify the area you need to focus on, then focus on it. Don't waste time on the stuff you know really well. Put your time where it needs to be.
Yeah.
And if with ACHE giving you a free test every year, they say you can sign up for it, and if you do it, you can take the test that year. It gives you a chance to find out maybe if you're not sure. So put a reasonable amount of study in and then take the test, and if you don't pass it, didn't really cost you anything. Then take it afterwards, and after you've studied for the areas you need.
Yeah, I'm not a strong test taker. I'm more street smart, if you would. But one tip I really had to really focus on is that California has a lot of specific laws, and they don't pertain on this test. And it's really hard to separate the very specific state laws with a more general federal regulated, that mindset, if you would. So, just going in to the test and having that mindset that it doesn't pertain specifically to California strict laws, think more broad or think more general sense. So that really helped too.
Yeah, because I mean, the stuff you live with day to day, you sort of know instinctively and you think about it, but you got to remind yourself that every state is different. So they are going to ask generic, they're going to ask in terms of the laws, only the federal level. And those are the ones you want to concentrate on.
Great. Good discussion.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Ron.
thanks for that, Ron.
For the input. And I think we're ready to culminate the session, right?
I think
So
we are.
yeah. So yeah,
that's
thank
right.
you. So thank you for your participation today. And next week we will be doing the human resources and finance, wherein most of the test takers, they are really waiting for finance because it's one of the hardest part of the exam. So we hope to see you again next week. At the same time, we'll be it will be from 10 o'clock to 11:30. And thank you for staying with us until almost 12 today. So
And just one other thing, which is James Revels, who does the finance, is great. So, people who don't click automatically with finance, I think really benefit by listening to him. So it should be a good session.
okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.